Right, well, we got some folks here. So welcome everybody to this week's edition of Military Trailblazer Office Hours. Thank you for taking time out of your Wednesday evening to spend it here in the spirit of community mentorship and learning. I'm your host, David Albright, joined by Geraldine Hall from Japan. I'm a solution engineer here at Salesforce and a military trailblazer. Each week we invite a co-host or co-host to take part in the conversation so that we can leverage their experience, expertise, and unique perspectives. The focus for tonight's session is exploring Salesforce nonprofit roles in the ecosystem. So if you've ever been interested in any niche roles with a nonprofit ecosystem, this is a good session for you. I'd like to briefly welcome and introduce our co-host panel for tonight's session, Dar Veverka, Jessica Kwok, and Rachel Park Brayboy. Dar is a senior solution architect at Idealist Consulting. She is also a Salesforce MVP, a nonprofit tech leader and strategist, as well as a board member for Amplify, whose mission is to support historically excluded voices in technology. Jessica is a 7X certified Salesforce consultant with well over 10 years of experience with Salesforce exclusively in the nonprofit space. For the last 2 years, she has flexed her entrepreneurial spirit as an independent Salesforce consultant. She's also the San Francisco Nonprofit User Group co-leader. Lastly, we have Rachel. Rachel is a Salesforce implementation consultant at Arcus, former Salesforce MVP and a Golden Hoodie Award recipient. She also founded the first Salesforce Saturday in Los Angeles, leads the LA Salesforce Architect Trailblazer community group, and is a small business owner extraordinaire. She is founder and creator of the Park Puff seatbelt pillow for breast cancer and surgery patients worldwide. So it's great to have all three here. We really haven't had nonprofit as a topic on here, so it's really great to co-host with us and talk about some of this. It'd be great if each of you could take a moment to introduce yourself further and share your Salesforce stories. Dar, would you like to lead us off?
Sure. My name is Dar Veverka. As Dave mentioned, I'm a senior solution architect at Idealist Consulting. I live in Baltimore, Maryland, and I've been doing technology for over a couple decades now. I started with Salesforce around 2014. The nonprofit that I worked at was using it. Pretty rudimentary usage at that point. It was just for development, the good old classic interface, not a whole lot going on. And just sort of every nonprofit after that, we used it. And by about 2017 to 2018, I was doing a whole lot of Salesforce. And I would say by 2020, it was probably 75% of my job. And at that point, I decided that did I want to go into Salesforce consulting or stay with nonprofits? And I decided to combine the two and do nonprofit Salesforce consulting. So that's how I ended up doing what I'm doing. So I implement and manage Salesforce instances for nonprofits all day long. And fun fact about me, I actually grew up on military bases. My dad was a non-com tech sergeant. I lived on military bases till I was in middle school.
Nice. You know the fun of it.
I do. I grew up on Air Force bases.
Yeah, it's always fun. Jessica, would you like to go next?
Absolutely. So hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Kwok. I'm located in San Francisco, California. So I am luckily escaping the heat wave that's engulfing the rest of the states. That's why I pay the big bucks to live out on the West Coast.
Yeah, true.
But I'm currently an independent Salesforce consultant. But prior to that, I got my start in my career start working at a nonprofit and kind of accidentally became their Salesforce kind of power user slash admin. I realized that there was a whole industry built around helping nonprofits get started up with Salesforce. So that's when I decided to make the transition because I love working with Salesforce, but I also still wanted to work in the nonprofit space to be able to give back to the community. So I worked for about 7 years with a small agency out in San Francisco called Dayspring Partners before I made the leap to become an independent consultant. Funnily enough, I wanted to go corporate, but I just found the independent life to be much more enjoyable. A fun fact about me, I have a dog named Fudge who's adopted from South Korea.
Nice. We have to see Fudge sometime in the video. Rachel, you want to bring us home?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Park Brayboy. I'm a Salesforce implementation consultant at Arcus. I'll start with a fun fact since we're all talking about Amplify. So all three of us have very long histories with Amplify. So Jessica was actually part of my original Amplify Mentoring Circle, and now Jessica and I are actually both part of the Trailblazers organizing committee. So if you come to Trailblazers event, you'll probably see us. So I've been working with Salesforce since about 2008. I was not in a technical role, but I was at a nonprofit. I was a power user. A lot of people came to me for help with reports and things like that. And at one of the next nonprofits I was at, there was a Salesforce team. And I know you hear the term accidental admin a lot, but I like to say I'm an intentional admin because I knew I wanted to get there, but wasn't quite sure how. So I pitched myself anyway. I had absolutely no experience, except a lot of passion for it. They did not have a role for me at the time, but this is why I always say apply for the role anyway, even if it's not listed, because a year later when they did, they remembered me. And then I officially became a Salesforce admin. So after years of being an on-staff admin at many nonprofits, I then moved to the consulting side. I think it's a really interesting perspective to have worked in both of those roles. So, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, there's some impressive amount of experience on here when you guys are talking dates, 2018, 10 years, things like that. It's a long time in this ecosystem. I think I've been in it 4 years, and that feels like forever the way the technology changes. And the experience that you three bring is excellent. So for those joining for the first time, we always like to briefly explain the purpose of these office hours. These sessions are an informal get-together for gathering with military trailblazers and allies to explore non-technical Salesforce career and branded relating topics to help you achieve your professional development and career-related goals. The next hour is intended to be an opportunity for collaborative mentorship. Everyone on the call is encouraged to step up and help answer questions from your perspective, which will provide additional diversity of experience to the answers given. Please keep an eye on the chat window during tonight's session. I and others on the call share a lot of great information there, including learning, networking, and employment opportunities. If you'd like to ask a question at any point during today's session, please feel free to do so. If you don't feel as comfortable speaking up, you can also post your questions in chat. I'll do my best to monitor the chat window and also be looking for raised hands. And finally, tonight's session is being recorded. If you'd like to share an attribution-free comment, please let me know before speaking, and we'll make sure it's edited out of the final recording. So with that all out of the way, we have a couple different topics that we'll talk about, but nonprofit is really, I think a lot of people, and I was talking with Dar about this before we kind of came on, a lot of people think nonprofit is a stepping stone. When you come into the ecosystem, I think, you know, Geraldine and I saw this back when we kind of came into it, like, oh, I'll, you know, get your admin cert, go to a nonprofit and kind of work your way from there. Let's get that out of the way. Since Dar, we kind of brought that up. I know now, having watched it over the years, that's not really a good way for a number of reasons. One, it's not really fair to the nonprofit community. Two, that product is pretty specific, right? And as it's transitioning now into other, what I would say SKUs or products, as it comes off of the NPSP, it's still a pretty specific niche area and different than some of the typical sales service. So I'm going to throw that out there. I'm going to let you guys take a whack at it, and then I'll kind of come back around for some others. Go ahead, Dar.
I was going to say, I think we all probably have many thoughts along this line. I'm going to put an article in the chat that I always found to be a good one. This is Gordon Lee's article. It's a two-parter on why you shouldn't volunteer at a nonprofit just as a stepping stone, but what you could do instead. So as David mentioned, it's hard on the nonprofits. And nonprofits are like any other business. They've got very specific business processes. So, you know, if you went down to any other business and said, hey, let me into your Salesforce org and let me have full control of it, they'd be like, no. So you can't really expect a nonprofit to, you know, to let you in like that. And it's often hard on the nonprofits, so it's not really the best way to get your foot in the door. And I think you'll find very few nonprofits are amenable to it anymore, just because of the amount of energy it takes to you know, guide someone through volunteer tech, and because nonprofits' usage of tech is much more sophisticated than it used to be. So it's not, you know, it's not so simple to just let someone be a volunteer admin. So it's a route I think that a lot of people also find frustrating if they try and do it, because you find that there aren't any opportunities. It's just not really a thing anymore. Rachel or Jessica, you want to add in?
Oh, go ahead, Jessica.
I'll just say I agree completely, and I also always link people to Gordon's article. He's my co-leader, so I'm very familiar with it. It's just not a great thing to do unless you truly are committed to the cause and you're willing to stick with the nonprofit, then maybe, that is okay. But to kind of just use a nonprofit as your little playground to test things out and potentially just kind of leave them hanging once you found your full-time job or whatever, with all those customizations that they don't know how to maintain because they're a nonprofit, they're small, they only could afford a volunteer. It's just not a great thing to do.
Yeah, and I would third everything that everyone said. I actually had Gordon on my LA Architect group, and we did a whole session about NPSP, nonprofits, and also the blog post that he wrote. And he shared too about how you can get your own experience because there's usually something in your life that you need to track. And that's great experience instead of going and kind of, taking some risks with a nonprofit, which again, isn't very fair to them. One instance where I think it might be not as bad is I was part of a team. So I had, more senior admins on my team. I had people that could guide me and make sure that I was following best practices. So I think in those instances, if you have guidance and you know the best practices will be followed, that could be, a slightly different consideration. I also want to shout out I don't think it's even called the pro bono program anymore, but Salesforce had a program that where their employees would do match with nonprofits to help them with projects. I believe it's called the Impact Exchange now. I find a lot of nonprofits just don't even know about it. But I always recommend that as a great alternative to someone volunteering that's brand new to Salesforce.
Yeah, I know some of our folks assist with that internally, right? And yeah, good points. I just wanted to bring that up because I know it has been something that has always kind of I've watched just over the years, and I know you've dealt with it and felt it. And that product is just so specific, even as it changes. So now we got that on record. So to start off, what initially drew you all to Salesforce, and importantly, what led you to focus on the nonprofit sector? Jessica, you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. So after I graduated college, I knew I wanted to work in the nonprofit space. I was just really drawn to the idea of giving back to the community, like feeling good about the work that I did in my life. So I landed a job with a Bay Area nonprofit in fundraising operations. I literally had no idea what databases or Salesforce was at all, but they just happened to have implemented Salesforce, but they were really struggling. But my manager was super process and systems oriented. She was like telling me all the time, if it's not in Salesforce, it didn't happen, and getting me in there and putting data in. So that was just drilled into me. And then I went to my first Dreamforce and I drank the Kool-Aid. And from there, I was just hooked. And I realized that there were a lot of things with, setting up Salesforce that really click with me and how my mind works. Like I love setting up processes. I love working with people to try to problem solve. So like I mentioned, after a while, the nonprofit, things weren't going great with the organization, and I knew I had to make a leap. And I was drawn to Salesforce consulting for nonprofits so that I could, again, have the best of both worlds, be able to explore this new career that was really appealing to me, but still stay really connected to nonprofits. And it's great to be working as a consultant, at least, because you get to see the diversity of nonprofits out there. There's so many nonprofits doing great work, unexpected work, really unique work. And that just keeps me going every day.
Dar, Rachel?
Sure, I'll go. Oh no, Rachel, go ahead.
Sorry,
You
Dar,
go. I'll go last.
No, you go. No, you go. Okay, I'll go. So I was actually already working in nonprofits. I was at a school, and I don't know if I'm going to date myself if people remember FileMaker Pro, but they had FileMaker Pro. And the the purchasing process for the teachers in summer was really painful. I believe it was part on paper, part in the computer. We had to bring in a second resource, I think, for a couple of weeks to help us with it. And I went to my boss at the time, was like, can I please overhaul this? And so she was like, your boss, Jessica, and she's very supportive of whatever I needed to do to do my job better. And she's like, sure, whatever you need to do. She sent me to a FileMaker Pro class for a week. I came back, I overhauled the system. I think it took us about 2 weeks to do it originally. And I did it in one afternoon. And I remember I was like, we're done. And my boss was like, you mean for the day? I said, no, we're done. And I think even for me, that was a spark that was like, whoa, like this is really amazing. Like what a really well-designed system could do. The teachers were so thankful. And so I think for me, that was really my spark as a data dork. And then as a few nonprofit roles later, they use Salesforce. And for me, I think it was just a natural next step with the skills that I already had. And so I just took to it really quickly and really enjoyed using it. And our admin at the time was super busy. It was really tough to get time with her. So a lot of users were coming to me like, can you help me with this report? And that's really how I got started. So.
Dar?
For me, I originally started at nonprofits as a wholesale manager and sort of stumbled sideways into tech. And that's how my tech career started. And I went to for-profit companies and I did Microsoft and Cisco and all those things. And after a while, I just kind of got tired of working for corporations. So I went to nonprofits. And the first large nonprofit I landed at, we had the Blackbaud implementation from hell. It was just terrible. And if any of you have worked with Blackbaud, it's a competing CRM system. It's incredibly restrictive. You can't build much. Blackbaud really likes to control everything. Very few integrations allowed. It's really a terrible system to work in. And that nonprofit had that. And it was just the worst thing in the world. I had to finish an implementation that had been dragging on for 3.5 years when I landed there. It was the worst project I've ever been involved in. And we had some layoffs. So then the next nonprofit I landed at had Salesforce. And I was like, oh God, you could do anything with this system. You could build, anything. It's just a matter of time, skills, and money, but you can just keep building. And so I kept, running into Salesforce, and pretty soon I sought that out. And I just love the fact that it's like a giant ever evolving puzzle. It's really just, like I said, it's time, skills, and budget restricting what you can do, but otherwise you can build most anything in it. So being able to take a nonprofit's business problem and figuring out how to craft that into a solution, a tech solution for them, I think is a very fulfilling way to work. And I love working on that every day. And it's just light years away from that horribly restricted, terrible Blackbaud project that I had several years ago. It sort of drove me away from that.
That hasn't scarred you at all. You're fine.
Not at all. I'm not a recovering Blackbaud user at all. But just, it's just such an interesting, ever evolving puzzle versus some other systems.
Sometimes a little too evolving. Sometimes it's just like, oh man,
Sometimes
what are we doing?
hard to keep
what
up
just changed?
But always interesting.
Thank you, Salesforce Ben. Every morning as you're drinking coffee, like, what changed? So what are some common pathways and resources for individuals interested in transitioning into Salesforce roles within nonprofit organizations, and how can the military community leverage their unique skills and experience for success? There's a three-pointer right there. But I think it's a good question, right? Because I think nonprofit can be alluring in some ways. I think it has a little bit of a negative reputation for oh, it's just low paying, it's nonprofit, so on and so on. But I think military can fit into it very well because of the structure of it. So what are your thoughts on that? Rachel, how about you start?
Okay, well, I may tackle the first part and defer to the others on the third part. Sorry, David, I don't remember what was the first part of the question though.
Some common pathways and resources for individuals interested in transitioning into Salesforce roles within nonprofit.
Oh, that's a good question. I think going to your local user groups are really helpful to get introduced to the community. There are nonprofit groups. LA has a nonprofit group. I partner a lot with the LA nonprofit group. Jessica and Gordon lead the one in San Francisco. We partner a lot on the BOVA events. Also, Salesforce Saturday is a great way to get just exposure to Salesforce in the community, really low pressure. You just show up, have coffee, depending on how they run it. But mine was like, come have coffee, let's do Trailhead for a little bit. And then you just start building your community from there and getting exposed to it and seeing what you like. And, if you're at a nonprofit group, you're going to connect with that community. So I would definitely get involved with your local groups.
Yeah, that's a good point. Jessica, Dar.
Yeah, I think
there's-
so.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
no,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. All right. Sorry, we all keep trying to go at the same time. I would say good skills to have are adaptability, time management, and ability to organize yourself, all of which I think this community has. And when you're thinking about nonprofit roles, don't just think admin when you're thinking about Salesforce. Nonprofits used to just use Salesforce for what's called development in nonprofits, which is not software development, it's fundraising. But that's no longer the case. Sure, they still use it for development, but also program and human case management, human services. They might use it for that. They might use it for grant making. So think about, if you're interested in doing a nonprofit Salesforce role, what exactly do you want to do? Is it straight admin? Or like Rachel, are you more of a data dork? Do you really like getting into the reporting and that? Would you rather be a frontline worker and you're going to be using Salesforce all day long, as program and case management? So think about why you would want to go to a nonprofit, find one whose mission you align with, and think about what do you want to do, or find a nonprofit sector that you really think you'd like to join, and think about what you'd like to do at that nonprofit, and chances are there's going to be some sort of interaction with Salesforce. Don't get boxed into thinking you just have to be a Salesforce admin. There's other ways, and particularly if you're struggling to get a nonprofit Salesforce admin job, but that's really what you want to do, you can go sideways by becoming a front-end power user and then end up as potentially a back-end user. So really think about what you want your role to be.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I'll hit on that. Jessica, I think you were getting ready to say something.
Yeah, I think, Dar, that's exactly what I was going to say. There's plenty of Salesforce adjacent roles in nonprofits that aren't just, being a Salesforce admin. That's actually how I got my start in Salesforce. I was actually never a Salesforce admin at my first job, but I was kind of the power user. I was helping educate other people on the benefits and how to use Salesforce. I was building their reports. I was helping teams that weren't on Salesforce think about how to build out Salesforce for them. So there's plenty out there besides just straight Salesforce admin. And I think the skills between for-profit and nonprofit, they're transferable. It's just going to be different vocabulary, I think, and it'll be getting used to using Salesforce in a nonprofit context. But I think a lot of technical and soft skills are still transferable between the two.
Yeah, I think I wanted to bring that up too. I think a lot of times coming into the ecosystem, you hear, oh, nonprofits, right? You're thinking like 15, 20 person orgs, right? And these little tiny orgs, and you're just going to be an admin, and all you're going to do is be an admin. And that's not that at all. There are some pretty massive enterprise level nonprofits out there who have some pretty complex business use cases and business processes, right? And have full suites of config, developers, things like that, not just this single admin doing everything. So I think that's important to point out. Adam asked, what do you mean by a front-end power user?
I would love to answer that one with an example. So at one nonprofit I was at, we had someone on it was an educational nonprofit, recruitment and admissions team. And she was a front-end power user of Salesforce. She very clearly understood Salesforce, kind of intrinsically got it. And she was able to explain Salesforce requirements that her users on the recruitment and admissions team needed. She was able to explain that clearly to us on the tech team and then translate things back. So after a while, we're like, hey, why don't we help you get your Salesforce administrator cert? This was around circa 2018 or 2019. And we're like, why don't we help you get that cert? Because you really seem to get Salesforce, and then we'll give you delegated administrative rights because you know what you're doing. And so she slowly got more and more rights in Salesforce till she was pretty much a full-blown admin. She learned Pardot. She is now the product owner at the foundation arm of a very large financial institution, a international financial institution that has a foundation nonprofit arm. She's now the product owner for Salesforce there. So she started out as just someone who worked with Salesforce on the recruitment and admissions team, but she very clearly understood Salesforce, acted responsibly when using it, and knew what she was doing. So we, very quickly promoted her up and gave her access because she was really good as a front-end power user. So that's what I meant by that, just kind of an example of how that can work.
Perfect. Thank you. Geraldine.
Yeah, Dar, I think that's an amazing point right now, especially as we're not necessarily seeing quite as many entry-level positions into Salesforce specific roles that oftentimes people will kind of write off just working for a Salesforce customer, because the more that you have experience just working on the platform, in the platform, even if it's not in a typical admin type of role, you still are gaining a valuable skill set and creating a point of view on how things could potentially be better in a Salesforce implementation. So I think that's a great point, that if you're struggling to find kind of that first foot in the door, don't write off some of those roles that still interact with the Salesforce platform.
Yeah, I would agree. Understanding how front-end users use the system is incredibly valuable. You have to understand that even if you're doing back-end work. Otherwise, you're just building something that doesn't work for anyone.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, right, consultants, developers, and then admins get a lot of the glory, but the truth is a good BA that can translate in layman's terms what's going on and can kind of define, like, no, this is what they're doing, this is what they need, and be able to translate that to user stories and things like that. Oof, that's a magic power right there, right? Because I think hypothetically, we may have all met that one person who's really good at the tech side, but just doesn't interact real well with the customer, right? And that's great for the technical side, but not necessarily for that being able to interact. Can't say enough about that one.
David,
Jessica, go
oh,
ahead.
sorry, David, could I just add a point?
Sure.
Just wanted to add that not all nonprofits use NPSP or the new nonprofit cloud. So just keep that in mind as well. I've certainly worked with nonprofits that they've explored what NPSP could do, and it just wasn't for them. So it always comes back to, what does the nonprofit actually need, and absolutely understanding that so that you can make a recommendation.
Yeah, that's perfect, right? Understand the true use case and the pain points and provide the correct solution. And it's funny because I will say this, you like to think the vertical you work in is so complicated. No one can understand that vertical like you. I had some demos from someone showing me Nonprofit Cloud the other day because we were looking at bringing some of that stuff into one of our solutions, and I was kind of blown away. It was like looking at from classic to lightning. It was so different what we were seeing, and I was just like, and I was on with 3 other architects, and I was like, did that really feel like we're looking at a completely different product? And they're like, yeah, there were components in there that we hadn't seen, and it was just like, oof. So Jessica has a question in chat. How would you suggest positioning yourself for that kind of role, not necessarily in a nonprofit? And Jessica, you were kind of talking about that front end power user. Yeah. So how would you position yourself for a front end power user role?
I'm happy to take that because I was a front-end power user. I just really loved helping people with reports, and I raised my hand a lot, and I made that known. And then pretty soon you kind of become the go-to person for that, at least in the org I was at, and then they start coming to you. So that's kind of how I started, and I was a power user for a long time before I made the move to admin. So just raise your hand, let it be known what your interests are, and people need the help, so I'm sure they will gladly take it.
And Jessica actually followed up that question with, she's a certified admin. Is that going to put me in the overqualified zone? And I would say no, not even close. I don't even know if there is truly an overqualified zone. I mean, if you want to do that role and you apply for it or show interest in it, more qualifications is more better in my mind. Anyone else have thoughts on that?
Sure, I can go. a lot of times when folks are trying to get into the Salesforce ecosystem, you'll limit yourself to looking for admin roles or things with admin or administrator in the title. But if a nonprofit is using Salesforce, look for Salesforce in the job description. So like a program manager that will say something like familiarity with Salesforce helpful. You know that that program manager is logging all of their work into Salesforce. And that's how you kind of look for those roles. Don't limit yourself so much on the keyword search that you're only looking for the administrators. Granted, you don't want the flood of job postings, but open that up a little bit more so you're looking for more of those front end roles instead of just the back end roles when you're job hunting. The administrator cert, I would think, would be a plus, when you're applying for a job, especially if you're looking for someone that understands Salesforce.
I don't think that would be a problem at all. Geraldine?
Yeah, so I often do this with customers at times to figure out what type of technology they use, but I'll go sometimes, Amanda, I saw your question on their job boards, and I will see what type of roles they have posted, even if it's not a role that I specifically am looking for. If I'm seeing anywhere on their job boards that they're hiring for someone that has Salesforce experience, I know that they're a Salesforce customer or soon to be a Salesforce customer. So with that, you could kind of look at some of those adjacent roles for potential experience for you to build and to get your foot in the door as one of those kind of end users versus a typical or traditional admin. Did that answer your question, admin? Amanda, between my and Dar's answer? Awesome. Okay.
So this is one we'll do one question, we'll do a picture, and then Rachel, I want to queue you up after the picture for you want to talk about some networking and things like that in this job market. And I've always wondered about this, working the nonprofit side. What unique joys and rewards do you find in working with nonprofit clients? And do you have any thoughts or experiences of how that may differ from other sectors in the ecosystem? So the for-profit obviously is really kind of designed to do that, right? We're selling widgets, we're handling service. I've always wondered personally myself, through the nonprofits, do you get more satisfaction out of it working on those customers?
I love this question because it's been kind of on the top of my mind. I've been feeling a little overwhelmed in the past couple of months with just like tons of work. And I think when you get to that stage, it can be very easy to just kind of shut your mind down and just like click all the buttons and build all the flows and just check off all the things that are on your to-do list. But I had a moment when I was in the middle of a somewhat large implementation for a local nonprofit. They give out scholarships to about like 1,000 children or 1,000 graduating seniors in Oakland to go to college. So that's a big deal. That's a lot of people. And I had to just take a step back and realize, like, I am building a system that is sending these underprivileged youth out to college with scholarships, a lot of them first generation, immigrant, etc. And when I stopped to think about that, I was like, wow, like the work I do is really important and it's really impactful. And it's not just sitting around clicking buttons and checking off a to-do list, but it is actually moving their mission forward. And I see that too. I work with a local nonprofit that does a lot of work with small businesses in San Francisco. And it's a lot of businesses that I frequent. And I know that they're helping them, and I'm kind of helping them too in the background by working with this nonprofit and helping transition them into Salesforce. So it keeps me going. I always need to remind myself that I'm helping people in this job in a lot of different ways. And it keeps me going for sure.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Rachel, Dar?
Good. Oh, good, Dar.
I gotta stop calling you both. I gotta call one and then the other.
Then we both go off mute. Very, very similar to Jessica. When a client tells you, like one recently said, the membership, they came off all spreadsheets and went into, an organized system, Salesforce, for the first time. When they then message and tell you that they're now 3 months ahead on membership renewals and they've doubled their membership renewals, and they were able to get some more things because it's so much less work for them to do this. Or locally, I live in Baltimore City. Our schools are severely underfunded. A lot of them don't have heat. We have schools that close during the winter because there is no heat, or there's malfunctioning heat, or they close during the late spring because there's no air conditioning. So there's a local foundation that helps get grants to help repair those schools, and they're one of my clients at work. So just being able to to know that we help them do better, raise more money, track that money better, get more money into the local Baltimore City schools. It's like Jessica said, even seeing that local impact just really makes it worthwhile. Makes you want to get up and go to work in the morning, or go upstairs to your office depending on where you're working. I think we all work from home.
Oh, good old work from home. Rachel?
Yeah, I actually was, so I'm actually, shortly after I turned 40, I had been in this ecosystem for a while and gotten certified and was on my way. And then I was shockingly diagnosed with stage 2B triple negative breast cancer. And so I had to leave this world for about 2 years to deal with treatment and recovery. And I honestly didn't know if I could come back. And I had a very toxic Salesforce for-profit job before I left. I had a really hard time wanting to come back to this ecosystem because I couldn't, at that point in time, remember anything positive about it. Every memory I had was pretty negative, and it took me a while to really dig through what is it I really loved about it. What I know I needed to come back and work with meaning, especially after cancer. So I decided, if I can come back and do it on my own terms, if I can come back and do it with meaning, that would be, that would make a huge difference. So I call it my Salesforce 2.0 career. When I came back, I've pretty much worked with nonprofits, and that's intentional.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. Yeah, Salesforce 2.0. I see it too, Amanda. That's pretty crazy. Well, now that we're all watery-eyed, Rachel, let's go ahead and take that picture. So we're at the midpoint of our session. Before I forget, which I usually do, let's get a group photo for sharing on social media. This is important because we always like to be branding. We'll plan to post this on LinkedIn and Twitter tomorrow, and we'll tag everyone in the photo. If you only have your first name showing in the Google Meet and want to be tagged, please feel free to include your full name in the chat window. It'll make it much easier for us to find you and tag you. And for everyone who wants to participate in the photo, please unmute your video, and we'll grab a screenshot. And I will, those of you who join frequently know I'll probably have my mouth open on this. So I'll give you a countdown. It never fails. I think I had a good one last week or 2 weeks ago. All right. 3, 2, 1. Hey, I'm not looking too bad. It'll probably like lock up the computer over here. All right. So where are we? Rachel, I want to cue you up. You had some stuff that you wanted to talk about for this current job market, and it's obviously a hot topic to talk about. What tips would you give to someone who is job hunting in the current Salesforce market? And I'm pretty sure everyone's ears just perked up. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I have a long list, but in
Hit it.
respect to time, I thought of 10 top ones for today. So I hope this helps someone out there. So I love my list. So I'm just going to read it off as my list. So number 1, know how low can you go? How long can you survive financially? It's important to be aware of your money reality and how much runway you actually have. This number was always in the back of my mind. 2, apply for unemployment ASAP. I waited to apply for this, but really wish I hadn't. Please note it takes a few weeks to go into effect, so apply for this as soon as possible. Number 3, I think one of the most important is get clear with yourself. What do you want in your next role? What are your non-negotiables, deal breakers? What are your nice to haves? I created a wish list for my next role and ranked it by priority with the most weighted item first. I only applied for things I really wanted, and this list was my North Star. Number 4, always apply. With my wish list guiding me, I would also often see roles where I knew I may not have every qualification, but I know I'm smart and can figure it out. I tried to stay out of my own way and still applied for roles that were out of my comfort zone. It never hurts to try. If you don't ask, the answer is always no. Number 5, leverage the Trailblazer community. I often say that the Salesforce community is truly like no other, and this journey only confirmed it. This is why it's so important to grow and nurture your network always, not just when you need something. In today's tough market, a stellar resume, unfortunately, is not enough, and having someone who can get your name in front of the hiring gatekeepers is crucial. Don't be afraid to reach out nicely to someone at the company who can get you out of the application pile. Number 6, connect with layoff buddies. Sadly, this is still a very tough market, and unfortunately, I have many friends who are in different phases of their careers, including being recently laid off. This is not an easy journey, and having true friends who understood and helped me navigate the emotional ups and downs were an absolute gift. Check on them often and continue to support each other. Number 7, if they offer their time, take it. Several friends offered to connect me with recruiters who may not be hiring at the time, but they were all willing to talk and learn more about me. All of these calls only expand my network. They may have a better fit for you down the road, or if you're not a good fit for them, they may know another recruiter who needs what you offer. Stay open to these conversations. Number 8, practice gratitude. I know this is easier said than done. This is a challenging journey, but I always remembered that I had amazing family and friends, and lots of daily kisses from my pug, especially after being rejected, also reminded me that he loved me too. Number 9, find pockets of joy where you can. So much of this journey is out of your control, and it can be difficult to not worry about all of the unknowns. I tried to focus on what I could control and the things that brought me joy amid all the uncertainty. For instance, I rediscovered playing the piano after not loving lessons when I was a kid. And number 10, lastly, keep going. Early on, the great Jace Bryan said to me, do not tie this decision to your worth. Know that your accomplishments, talent, worth, and value can never be taken away. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Keep applying and have several burners going. This will take the pressure off of waiting on any one organization and help you stay sane. I often said, I'm dating everyone until someone puts a ring on me. As my friend and author Minda Hart says, what's meant for you won't miss you. I thought of these words often throughout everything. After every rejection, my mother would say something similar. In the end, I held out for what I really wanted, and I am so glad that I did. Yes, this is a tough market, and it is not easy to get a new role, but it is not impossible. Please know that I was laid off shortly after the new year, and am now happily here as a new employee, so I hope this offers some hope. Although this journey isn't easy, don't get discouraged. Keep going.
Yeah, I agree, Amanda. Wow. Rachel. And you know, it's funny. I obviously use humor to divert the emotions of things. I think it's being male, but like Geraldine and I and Dave Nava, the cool part of doing these office hours every 2 weeks or every week, depending on how often we can do it, is like, it's like you find life coaches every episode, right? Every office hour is like, Rachel is my new life coach. So it's just impressive. That is really good, because obviously I think everyone in the ecosystem after, you know, January of 23, if you're not planning for the next one, right? If you don't have a plan now, I think everybody's got some kind of contingency plan. It's hard to say who is safe and who is not, and so therefore no one is safe. And so having that plan, and you had some things on there that I had never even thought about, right? Just your first two, I was like, oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. And just having that option and the power of networking. I think I say it on this office hours pretty frequently. You know, in the military, you network, but it's all your friends in the community, right? It's not the same thing. And you go like LinkedIn, what's that? It's like Facebook. And then you get out and start to realize, like, all the jobs I've gotten, and I've said it many times, all the jobs I've gotten since I left the military are because I knew someone, right? Or someone was like, hey, have you seen this? Did you look at this? And, you know, I think just being able to reach out and say, hey, what's that job like? you know, like this. What's nonprofit like? What would I do? What's your job satisfaction like? Can you help me find a job? You're the only one's got headcount or hiring. You know, it's so important. So thank you for sharing that. That was amazing. I will make sure that we mark that on the tape so that we can kind of get people cued in on that, because that's, and obviously very poignant for a lot of people today. So, whew, bringing the heat, Rachel. Okay, let's switch to another one. We got a couple minutes left, which is good. How can someone leverage their military background to support nonprofits in adopting and optimizing Salesforce solutions, particularly during transitions like the shift from MPSP to nonprofit cloud? There's a doozy. Anyone? Jessica, I'm looking at you. I'm going to just call you out.
Sure. Well, I would say I would imagine, I'm not connected to many people in the military, but I'd imagine that working in the military, coming out of it, you probably had a lot of life experiences working with other people, working in a team. And I think that's something that you can kind of take anywhere with you. Especially when it comes to working in a nonprofit or like implementing Salesforce, that's going to be something that is most definitely going to be some sort of team effort where you're going to have to know how to speak to a bunch of different people of varying, capabilities technically. People are going to be bringing their own strengths to the table, and being able to kind of coordinate that effort, I think, is really important and something that probably can take you anywhere, not just nonprofit specific.
Yeah. Dar, it looks like you're getting ready to go. I just want to say, I see a lot of people go to get out of the military and they're like, well, this is all I know. I don't know how to do anything else. And it's like, all we've done for X number of years is dropped you into situations with a whole bunch of people you didn't really know and formed a team and made stuff happen with usually under-resourced assets and, so you have skills and it's just figuring out how to transfer those over. And sometimes I think maybe nonprofit, which is why I was kind of excited to do this episode, is nonprofit has a purpose. It has a mission, which sounds very much like the military, where you have a purpose and a mission. Whereas in profit, sometimes that mission can get lost, right? It's just like making money for someone versus, hey, we are saving some people. We are taking care of things. We're fixing some things. Dar, did you have something you wanted to say?
I was going to second what Jessica said and some of what you said, adaptability, ability to work on a team, ability to skill up fast, ability to believe in a mission and to stick with that, all of those things. Think about how your soft skills translate. I helped mentor someone who had worked in construction, and they couldn't figure out how their skills could possibly translate to other things, but they'd run construction crews. So they knew how to do people management. They knew how to do project management. There's things you can translate. So don't think about it strictly as I only know how to build walls because I did construction. No, you ran construction crews. You can do people management. You can do, project management. You know how to do task management, time management. There's all different things that you can translate. So don't just think about the strict description of a job. Think about how those skills will translate and how you could translate those into tech, into working on tech and being able to be part of a team. How does that translate?
Yeah, good points. I think it's really just about, if you want to pivot, you can pivot. Don't tell yourself no. I mean, after Rachel's 10, and Amanda, thank you for putting in there. One, I don't know how you copied that down so quickly. That was amazing. Super skill. But, I think Rachel kind of summed it up there, right? You just got to keep going. If that's what you want to do and pivot. You can do it. You've learned these other things. Go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, I wanted to share that I do not have a traditional tech background. So I was a fashion major, for God's sake. So the fact I'm on a tech call right now is pretty hilarious. But I think it also speaks to how many diverse backgrounds are in this community, and that you really can come from any background and learn Salesforce, especially with Trailhead. It's the barrier to entry is so low now. So it's really opened the door for all these unique and diverse backgrounds to come into the ecosystem.
I say it in all my demos. So easy a pilot can do it, right? And there's some cockiness in there as well, right? But it's true, right? it's surprising when you're in Salesforce, even in the ecosystem, how many people have a non-traditional background, right? We have all kinds of people in Salesforce, and you're like, you did what? And you're here? Impressive. So, and I do feel that, like, I'll have meetings where we're looking at enterprise solutions for like several 100,000 users. And I'm just thinking, how am I here right now? But here we are, right? And you just figure it out and you pull the resources just like you've done before. So with that, what certs are most valuable for individuals focusing on nonprofits, right? So now that we've kind of talked about it, which ones should you really focus on? Do you really need to go get NPSP or nonprofit cloud? What do you think?
I may not be the best person to ask because I was actually a beta tester for the nonprofit cloud exam. But maybe Dar knows, I know that, like, I mean, I took it back when it was just NPSP and there was no NPC. So I do believe at some point that may change. Dar may know more.
Yeah, so they are going to change it. So as David mentioned, there's two nonprofit products. There's Nonprofit Success Pack, known as NPSP, and there's Nonprofit Cloud, which, if you know a little bit about industry clouds like Health Cloud or Financial Services Cloud, Nonprofit Cloud is an industry cloud. So it's based on that same set of industry tools in there. The Nonprofit Cloud, confusingly enough, certification is called Nonprofit Cloud Certification. Doesn't have a thing to do with Nonprofit Cloud right now. It's all NPSP. What's good about it, though, is like all consultant-based certifications, part of the test is about addressing business problems. So you'll find that, like with like the Sales Cloud consultants or the Experience Cloud consultant or the Nonprofit Cloud consultant, you're going to get some questions in there about understanding scenarios and understanding business problems, more so than you would get on like the straight technical admin type test. So I think it is a good test for that because it also helps you understand nonprofit business processes to some extent. And that's kind of critical. You can't really get that from a test. You just sort of like, you need to study and understand kind of like underlying things. Like we mentioned, development is fundraising in nonprofits and how central that is to a nonprofit. Honestly, platform app builder. Flows are really important. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. Flows have grown leaps and bounds over the past few years. And being able to be skilled in flow and understand when it's a good idea to use a flow and when it's overkill matters just as much for nonprofits. And platform app builder is a terribly named test, but it's more about automation. It's really what should be named advanced admin, versus advanced admin is more like advanced sales cloud. So I would say that. I don't know, Jessica and Rachel, what do you think?
I definitely second the platform app builder. I feel like it has a lot more things that I'd actually do on my day-to-day job in Salesforce, besides the NPSP or nonprofit cloud consulting, building NPSP, but definitely the platform app builder had actually applicable things, I think, to working in Salesforce as compared to even sometimes like the admin exam, sometimes talking about really complex sharing models and whatnot. Doesn't really happens in some nonprofits, but you'll also hit a lot of nonprofits where it's 10 users. We don't need to know about enterprise territory management, right? But maybe you might need to build a flow.
I just had to build something, enterprise territory management, for the first time, and I was like, oh man, I always thought this was something on the test they just asked you to see if you're paying attention. Yeah, I agree. Platform app builder, I think, is the first one that teaches you actually how to config, right? How do I put a data model together? How do I build a junction object, and why do I want one? When do I do one to many versus many to many? Also, the one I failed twice, and I'll admit that now. I think I've gotten over it, maybe. But that one, I think, is the one that I really started to figure out, like, oh, I can put these things together, and how do I connect them to make whatever I've dreamt up in my small little brain.
And can I add to that, David?
Sure.
If you're in NPSP land, that is a managed package that sits on top of Sales and Service Cloud. So it's certainly not prerequisite, but there are also Sales and Service Cloud certs. And I do have both, and so those could be valuable as well.
And
Terry,
go ahead. Who's
I was
talking?
going to say, Terry mentioned in the chat UX designer. That's also a good one. Making an experience that's good for the
Yes.
nonprofit staff. You know, it doesn't matter if you implement Salesforce if nobody's going to use it because it's a terrible front end. And I've seen that with admins. It's an excellent one to recommend where they're really good technical builders and they're terrible at the front end design. Like their page layouts are awful. Can't find anything.
And every page layout's different. Yeah.
Yeah, but they built some great back-end flows. So having that ability to understand how to translate that for users, UX designers, a good one.
We had a UX specialist on the team, and I never quite got it. And they're like, "No, look at how this flows. Look at how many button clicks." And you're like, "Oh, I never thought about that. I just built the flows, man." So, Geraldine, you have a comment?
Yeah, it's actually a question. So I know some of our more managed package-ish products, it's hard to get kind of hands-on experience without having that license. Is that still the case with the NPSP or this new nonprofit cloud, or do you all know if there's a like a demo org, or if Trailhead kind of builds those sandboxes that actually have that in it for people to kind of get some hands-on experience without actually having a license for it?
Yeah, I
And
may
I-
defer to, oh, sorry.
No,
I
go
may
ahead.
defer to Dar since she knows more about the new nonprofit cloud. But I think NPSP is actually a lot easier to get your hands on because you can just get that for free from Meta Deploy and just put it in a dev org, or I actually think the newer product is a little harder to get. I'll leave it to Dar though, since she knows more about that one.
And Dar just dropped a link in there for the free NPC trials, which is really nice.
They're 30 days, so just be aware it'll go away after 30 days. And for what Rachel said, I'm getting you the link to Meta Deploy, which is where the .org side of Salesforce stages their products. And that's off of Meta Deploy. You can install NPSP, as Rachel mentioned, into Sales Cloud. It's a managed package sitting on top of Sales Cloud. So just go grab your developer org, go to that link, grab NPSP, follow along on the trailheads.
And MPC being built on industry clouds, right? Public sector solutions, industry clouds, that should involve Omni Studio, correct?
Oh gosh. Yes, but it doesn't have to.
Yeah.
Don't let Omni Studio scare you off of nonprofit cloud.
That's pretty funny. We'll scratch that one from the tapes.
Sorry.
But
It's just
no,
it's a complex product on its own. So don't
Yes.
let the fact that it is an entire complex product within NPC scare you off of learning NPC. You don't have to understand Omni Studio to learn NPC. That's what I meant by that. It's like you don't
No.
have to know Omni Studio to do NPC.
You're right on. And the reason I brought that up is Omni Studio consultant, Omni Studio developer are becoming fairly sought after skill sets. They're certs to get because what's happening is, people are buying public sector solutions, but then they don't have skill sets to actually do the config for Omni Studio, right? To do the neat Omni scripts and flex cards and things like that. And the hard part about it is it's not really, there's very limited training on Trailhead at the moment. And so if you can find that, there's the niche, right? That you're now able to fill the gap because you've got that skill. So Iris, you have a question, ma'am.
Thank you so much. And oh my goodness, this has been so awesome. You really shed a light on a lot of things to do with nonprofit cloud. And if we could just make you guys all plushies, we would all be looking for you. Nonprofit cloud, I hear so many people, I haven't had a chance to utilize it yet or use it, but I hear some people excited for the new cloud. Some people there's no way that they're going to get rid of the old stuff. And what would you like to see? What's the biggest feature that you think would help nonprofit clouds or nonprofit organizations that hasn't been seen yet? I'm sorry, I've stumped you. I was just saying.
They're still thinking about the plushies.
Who wants to go?
Oh, I love it, Amanda. Huge anonymous donors. Yes, we want, everybody wants that.
Yes, everyone wants that. I think we'd all love to see volunteer management built native on the Salesforce platform for nonprofits. It is a huge gap. You have to go get a third-party product. Salesforce has a free package, but it's from 2016. You know, there's pain points around volunteer management. But what nonprofit doesn't need volunteers? So
Yeah.
that would be my vote for what I'd like to see developed in nonprofit cloud, native volunteer management package, or built in on it.
Sorry, Jessica.
I'm writing that down.
Yeah, I would love to see some more simplification or better documentation or training of some sort for the MPC. I can understand it's kind of at a nascent stage, so it's new, some things to be still ironed out, but it's definitely a very different beast from NPSP. It's a hard transition, I think, if you're going from one to the other. And it can be hard to find information about what's the best practice, how do I set up this thing, why is this thing not working? That can be a little frustrating for someone that's trying to adopt and learn the MPC. So I think, especially for nonprofits that may not have like a consultant to hold their hand all the way through, I think better guidance and materials, which I think Salesforce is working on, but it's not quite there yet.
Yeah,
Rachel?
I would. There's always a third-party tool you're going to need for forms. And then also donation forms are very important. There was Elevate, rest in peace, Elevate. I don't know what's come in its place, but that would have been nice. So just forms, I think, are always something a nonprofit needs, and especially a donation form that you can brand easily, but also has a little flexibility. There's always some nice to have. So.
Yeah, those are things maybe addressed in the new industry cloud because there's DocGen in there, but there's always the edge case that you need a special product in the third party and some of the stuff that comes into it. So with that, we're at the top of the hour. Before we close, I'd like to thank Dar, Jessica, and Rachel for co-hosting tonight's session. Been absolutely awesome having you here and getting your perspective on nonprofit and some of the topics we've discussed. Any last comments before we depart for the evening?
Please don't volunteer with a nonprofit unless you have a mentor.
And the alpha and the
All
omega.
love.
We started with that. We ended with that.
Excellent. I guess thank you for having us. This was fun.
Yeah, very, very insightful. Jessica?
I'm grateful to be here. I love doing these panel sessions and giving people insight into our work on the other side of the corporate world. So thank you for having us.
Thank you. With that, thank you so much for attending. Hope to see you next session, and everybody have a great Wednesday night and the rest of your week. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.